Adam Taxin with Daniel Greenfield talking about his column for September 3rd, 2012. That's Monday, September 3rd, 2012, which is called The Great Lie of Racism. This may be a cop-out question of me, Daniel, but why don't we start out first by just having you answer, what is the great lie of racism?
The entire idea that opposition to government centralization and federalism is racism.
Well, how did that evolve through the years when racism, as you point out in your column, once had a very specific meaning? Actually had a meaning that was kind of scientific, which you don't get into your column, but what was the evolution there?
Well, it really took root after the Civil War, when the old argument over to what extent the center of authority should be centralized within the federal government, and to what extent states' rights should dominate, took on racial colors.
Is it your belief, and it is implied rather than discussed in your column, that white Democrats basically use black Democrats in whatever capacity, or they use blacks, whatever it takes to keep in power? That's the impression I get, whether it's slavery, affirmative action today, busing, or segregation.
Yeah. If you think about it again, the entire idea was that slaves were supposed to be counted at least as a partial person in terms of political representation. Then again, we flash forward to today, and you still have the plantation, you still have the idea of an African American voting base. Yeah,
of course, I always have to remind people that it was the southern states who wanted blacks to be counted as full persons for the purpose of congressional representation, and the northern states that wanted blacks not to be counted. But I just want to point that out there. Now, you bring up how racism is no longer about race, and that sort of ties in, but wondering if you could just elaborate on that in terms of Barack Obama and the whole phenomenon around him, and that racism is an excuse for everything.
Obviously racism exists, but in terms of the whole national dialogue thing, what I would dub political racism, it exists primarily to defend government power. So when these people talk about racism, they don't mean racism in the classical sense. What they mean is opposition to centralized government power, and they've become completely detached from any kind of reasonable understanding of what racism is, and they're just making up increasingly crazy things.
Do you expect that the Obama campaign is going to throw out more racism charges, or do you think they possibly realize that they're counterproductive, that they'll turn off white voters at this point?
No, I just think they're going to keep on doing it, but they don't actually call for the charges. The thing about the government media complex is that the government can offer up the charges. I mean, the media can offer up the charges, and Obama can pretend to be a class act, for example, the way he does with Clint Eastwood, whereas proxies call him senile, but Obama says, I'm a big fan of Eastwood. This is par for the course with this type of thing.
That's a really good point. And, let me ask you also, what do you think Lawrence O'Donnell, who talked about golfer being a racial stereotype, and Chris Matthews saying Chicago is a racial code word, what do you think was going on there? Is that behind-the-scenes coordination as well?
Well, the coordination is obviously calling Republicans racist. The specific golfer thing is obviously did not come from the White House. The White House isn't that stupid. They're stupid, but they're not that stupid or crazy. But it's the whole premise that any criticism of Obama is racism, which we've seen for a while now. And so once you accept that argument, then you can attach racism to pretty much anything.
Any other final thoughts here?
Just to once again be careful and understand the kind of definitions that people are using. Just because the left uses a word doesn't mean it has the same meaning that you think it does.
Daniel Greenfield, thanks as always for your time.